The morning air turned out to be thick with the heady scent of damp earth as Daniel Foster made his way through the outskirts of his ranch. The recent storms had left the land soaked, turning the lowlands into dangerous wallet of dirt and water. He had visible sufficient overtime to understand that the terrain can be deadly for any animal unfortunate sufficient to wander too far into the swampland. Daniel, someone in his early 40s, had spent maximum of his lifestyles on my own. After leaving the army, he had observed solace within the quiet of the Colorado desolate tract, coping with a small ranch wherein he rehabilitated injured animals and advanced then liberating them once more into the wild. It had become his way of making up for the battles he had fought, a manner to heal in his private manner. As he adjusted the saddle on his horse, Shadow, a surprising, decided sound reduced through the air. It changed into faint but unmistakable, a cry for assist. Daniel froze, his skilled instincts kicking in. He scanned the horizon, attempting to find the deliverer of the noise. It wasn't the cry of a coyote or the decision of a bird. This changed into one of a kind, weaker, strained, almost pleading. Without hesitation, he installation Shadow and suggested him beforehand. The effective stallion replied right away, galloping towards the sound. The closer they had been given to the swampy vicinity at the edge of his land, the more potent Daniel's sense of urgency became. Something became wrong. As they approached the marshland, the sight earlier than him made his heart drop. A small wild Mustang foal changed into struggling inside the dirt, sinking deeper by means of the second one. Its tiny legs had been trapped in the thick muck, and with each attempt to free itself, it pleasant became greater and tangled. The foal had become covered in dust as plenty as its chest, its eyes massive with terror. Daniel's thoughts raced. He had visible complete-grown horses get caught in dust like this earlier then, and most of them in no way made it out. But this foal, he had become too younger to die like this. Dismounting in one rapid motion, Daniel grabbed a rope from his saddle. He knew he had to act fast. If the foal exhausted itself virtually, it might lose the need to fight, and once that befell, it would be over. Kneeling just at the threshold of the swamp, Daniel known as out in a calm but enterprise voice, "Hey little man, you're going to be okay. Just hold on." The foal flailed, its respiratory ragged. Daniel may want to revel in the ground shift under him as he inched nearer. The dust became treacherous, thick and unrelenting. He knew if he wasn't cautious he ought to get caught too. Looping the rope, he tossed it carefully throughout the foal's front legs. The second it tightened, the foal panicked, thrashing wildly. "Easy, easy," Daniel soothed, pulling gently but firmly. "I had been given you." The foal let out a pointy whinny, but something in Daniel's voice seemed to cut through its fear. It stopped struggling just prolonged enough for Daniel to tug difficult. The mud refused to launch its grip. Beads of sweat shaped on Daniel's brow as he pulled with every ounce of strength he had. His boots dug into the soft ground, his muscle organizations burning. Shadow, sensing the urgency, set free a sharp neigh and instinctively pulled alongside Daniel, the usage of his very own weight to assist. Then with one very last, determined pull, the foal broke free. The small horse collapsed onto strong ground, shaking violently from exhaustion. Daniel fell again, panting, his coronary heart hammering in his chest. For a moment neither of them moved, simply the sound of the wind, the rustling of leaves and the clean, exhausted breaths of the foal. Then slowly the Mustang lifted its head, its dust-streaked face assembling Daniel's eyes. Something handed among them in that instant, a silent expertise, a connection neither of them anticipated. Daniel reached out, his palms barely grazing the foal's soaked mane. "You're secure now," he murmured. The foal didn't run. It didn't recoil. It simply stared at him as if it in a few manner knew this man had virtually stored its life. But Daniel had no concept that this rescue become handiest the beginning. What could show up subsequent ought to defy the whole thing he concept he knew about wild mustangs. The foal lay trembling on the stable floor, its small chest rising and falling in brief, shallow breaths. Daniel crouched beside it, his heartbeat nevertheless pounding from the strive of the rescue. The dust clung to its sleek coat, a combination of dark brown and white barely seen underneath the layers of dust. It was younger, too younger to be by myself. Daniel reached out once more, slower this time, his palms slightly brushing in opposition to the foal's soaked mane earlier than the tiny Mustang flinched, instinct kicking in. Its legs twitched and it tried to face, however the strive changed into susceptible. It had spent too much power combating for its existence. "Easy little guy," Daniel murmured, his voice calm. "You don't want to run. You're secure now." The foal's ears flicked, registering his tone. It lifted its head slightly, its darkish eyes nonetheless complete of worry. Daniel need to simplest imagine what had befell. Had it gotten misplaced from its band? Had some issue spooked them, forcing them to leave it behind? The concept of a Mustang foal wandering on my own turned into unsettling. A Mustang without its herd emerge as good as defenseless. Daniel glanced within the course of Shadow, his dependable stallion status a few feet away, watching the interplay with silent know-how. Horses knew subjects. They felt things in a way that people couldn't continuously recognize. And Shadow, he modified into affected character. He knew that proper now, the foal wished reassurance now not pressure. Still, Daniel couldn't simply leave it proper here. The nearest wild horse band roamed miles away, and if the foal had been abandoned, it wouldn't remaining the night. Even if its mom had been nearby, the fragrance of the swamp might make it almost impossible for them to song every other down. The fragrance of stagnant water and thick mud overpowered everything. Daniel sighed, pushing himself up. All proper, kid, he stated. Looks such as you're coming with me. The foal flinched once more, seeking to transport, but its legs wobbled dangerously. It wasn't going everywhere fast. Daniel untied the rope from his saddle and looped it loosely across the foal's neck. The closing issue he preferred changed into to make it panic, however he wanted a manner to manual it home. With gradual, regular actions he pulled lightly. The foal resisted on the begin, however it turned out to be too vulnerable to position up an awful lot of a combat. It took some unsteady steps, its legs trembling beneath it. That's it, Daniel encouraged. Come on, you may do that. Shadow let out a easy giggle as if approving. The foal took another step, then any other. It staggered, however didn't fall. Daniel saved his motion consistent, not pulling too tough, simply sufficient to offer the foal something to have a look at. The Mustang hesitated, however in the long run started out to transport, every step gradual and uncertain. The trek back to the ranch turned into sluggish. The foal's exhaustion turned out to be obvious, and Daniel had to prevent a few instances to let it rest. It had been via a struggle in recent times, a fight for its lifestyles, and it wanted time to get higher. By the time they reached the ranch, the solar come to be dipping low, casting golden mild in the course of the sizable expanse of land. The air smelled of glowing hay and pine, a stark contrast to the swamp's decay. Shadow walked inside the path of his paddock, as although sensing his process became accomplished. Daniel, however, grew to end up toward the barn. The foal needed warm temperature, meals and rest. Once interior, Daniel spread clean hay in an open stall and removed the rope. The foal didn't bolt, a signal that it became too exhausted, or perhaps, just perhaps, it became starting to agree with him. Daniel crammed a bucket with water and located it close to the foal. It hesitated, then reduced its head and took a protracted, shaky sip. Good, Daniel murmured, watching closely. The foal's body comfortable barely, as even though figuring out for the primary time that it changed into secure. Daniel leaned towards the stall door, reading the younger horse. It come to be small however strong, a fighter. You want a name? He mused aloud. He concept for a second earlier than smirking. Storm? It turned into turning into. The foal had survived the typhoon that nearly took its lifestyles, and are available what may also. Daniel had a feeling this little Mustang had plenty greater combat left in him. What Daniel didn't recognize was that this had become just the begin. Storm wasn't simply any foal. What he might do inside the coming months would depart Daniel speechless. The night handed quietly within the barn, but Daniel slightly slept. He sat out of doors Storm's stall, watching over the sensitive foal as it shifted uneasily inside the sparkling hay. Every so often, the more youthful Mustang would possibly stir, letting out easy whinnies, its legs twitching as though however trapped inside the swamp. It became nonetheless fighting, preventing for survival even in its goals. Daniel sighed, rubbing at his tired face. He had seen this form of trauma in advance then, not simply in animals however in human beings too. The ones who had fought to stay on carried their battles lengthy after they had been stable. The barn grew to be dimly lit through an unmarried lantern placing from the wooden beam, casting flickering shadows along the partitions. The perfume of hay and leather-based mixed with the faint, lingering musk of swamp water. Storm shifted another time, his little body adjusting to the warm temperature of the barn. He changed into smooth now. Daniel had taken the time to wipe away the thick dust that had as soon as covered him, revealing a sleek, darkish coat underneath the dust, a true wild Mustang. Despite the foal's exhaustion, there was nonetheless fireplace in its eyes, and Daniel knew that fireplace wouldn't burn out without difficulty. Morning got here with the undertaking. At dawn, a chook's name echoed in the course of the ranch, signaling the begin of a latest day. Daniel stretched, his muscle mass stiff from the nighttime on the barn ground. He'd driven himself up, rolling his shoulders earlier than checking on Storm. The foal blinked sleepily at him but didn't circulate a top-notch deal. It was clear he modified into although improving. "Morning, team," Daniel stated softly, crouching with the aid of the stall door. "How we feeling?" Storm flicked his ears however didn't solution, which made Daniel chuckle. He grabbed a small bucket of milk replacer, a few factor foals wanted while separated from their mothers, and set it down near Storm. Daniel waited, knowing this can be a test. Would Storm accept assist or may want to the wild in him refuse? The foal eyed the bucket warily. Instinct informed him to her looking for his mom's milk, however she wasn't there. The scent of the formulation wasn't the identical, and his hesitation made Daniel's stomach twist. If the foal refused to consume, he wouldn't live on. "Come on, Storm," Daniel coaxed, his voice calm. "I are privy to it's now not what you're used to, however it's what you need." Storm decreased his head barely, sniffing at the bucket. His nostrils flared, sorting out the surprising heady scent. For a moment, Daniel notioned he'd reject it, however then, slowly, the foal commenced to drink. Relief washed over Daniel. "There you circulate, friend," he murmured. "That's it. You're a fighter, huh?" Storm saved ingesting, his frame visibly exciting because the nourishment settled into his empty belly. This had become a super signal. But simply as Daniel became starting to sense comfortable, a sudden sound startled them each, a far-off neigh, sharp and urgent. Storm's ears shot up, and in an instant he became on his foot. Daniel stood too, his intestine twisting. That wasn't Shadow. That become Wild. The band. His breath stuck in his throat. If the band became nearby, it meant Storm's mom would in all likelihood still be available, trying to find him. Daniel moved towards the barn door, stepping outdoor into the golden morning light. The air became crisp, sporting the scent of dew and dust. His eyes scanned the land, his pulse quickening. And then he noticed them, a group of untamed mustangs standing surely beyond the tree line. A dozen powerful, untamed horses, their muscle groups rippling under sunlit coats. And on the front, a mare, her coat matching Storm's. Storm let out a shrill whinny, pushing in opposition to the stall door. His mother had come for him. Daniel felt torn. He had rescued the foal. He had fought to keep him alive. But Storm was wild. He didn't belong in a barn. His vicinity changed into along with his band. The mare referred to as all over again, her decided cry filling the morning air. Storm's little frame trembled with intuition, his coronary heart pulling him closer to the handiest family he had ever recognized. Daniel's throat tightened. Was this it? Was he about to allow him go? The 2D hung heavy within the air. Storm's mom stood at the brink of the wood, her muscle organizations tensed, her eyes locked onto the foal within the barn. Behind her, the rest of the band waited, there are our bodies nonetheless, their ears flicking as they watched the scene unfold. Storm's tiny body shook with instinct, his legs transferring under him as he whinnied in response. He favored to go to her. Daniel felt a lump shape in his throat. He had spent the last day and nighttime combating to store this foal, bringing him again from the threshold of loss of life. And now he became faced with the reality of what had to take place. Storm belonged to the wild. Daniel had always stated it, but come what may additionally, it didn't make this moment any much less complicated. The foal pawed on the ground, irritating, his frame torn among the safety of the barn and the decision of the wild. Daniel sighed, stepping ahead, his boots crunching softly at the hay-protected ground. "All proper, infant," he murmured. "You got a choice to make." Storm had become to look at him, dark eyes unsure. The foal had started out to take into account him, that lots turned into clean. But consider and belonging were various things. Daniel knew that if he saved him proper right here, Storm would continue to exist, however he wouldn't be loose. And there has been a few component approximately that consciousness that didn't take a seat proper in his chest. He reached for the stall door, arms hovering over the latch. One motion and Storm might be unfastened. One movement, and Daniel will be letting pass of something he hadn't even found out he desired to keep at once to. Storm let loose another excessive pitched whinny, his frame vibrating with strength. His mother answered once more, stepping ahead. She wasn't going to wait all the time. Daniel inhaled deeply, steadying himself. He knew what he had to do. With a very ultimate appearance on the foal, he pulled the stall door open. Storm hesitated for 1/2 a second, then bolted. The foal's legs wobbled slightly as he ran, however the second his hooves hit the open subject, the hesitation became long gone. He ran with the whole lot he had, straight in the direction of his mom. The mare rushed beforehand, assembling him midway. Her effective frame faded as she nuzzled her misplaced foal. The comfort in her actions became simple. Daniel stood motionless as he watched them reunite, a mixture of feelings pulling at his chest. This changed into right. This turned out to be the manner it grew to be imagined to be. The band shifting across the pair, their presence protective. The stallion at the front, probable their chief, snorted and advanced, then turning again towards the trees. The others followed in shape. Storm's mom nudged him closer to the herd, urging him in advance. The foal hesitated for a second, his head turning once more closer to Daniel. Their eyes met, and for a quick 2D, Daniel swore he noticed something in Storm's gaze, a flicker of understanding, a silent thank you. Then, without any other sound, Storm grew to come to be and ran after the band, disappearing into the wooded area. Just like that, he changed into lengthy long gone. Daniel let loose a slow breath, his chest tight. He had achieved the right thing. He knew that. But why did it experience like he had simply out of place something? The ranch felt extraordinary after Storm left. The barn modified into quieter, the mornings emptier. Daniel told himself it changed into for the amazing. However, the hollow feeling in his chest informed a one-of-a-kind story. He went approximately his everyday ordinary, feeding the horses, checking the fences, tending to the land, but his thoughts usually drifted lower back to the small foal he had pulled from the swamp. Storm was in which he belonged. That thought had to have introduced peace. Instead, it introduced an atypical restlessness. Daniel had spent years dwelling by myself, avoiding attachments, keeping human beings, or maybe animals, at a distance. It had become much less tough that way. Life had already taken too much from him. But Storm had broken via those walls without even trying. And now he became long gone. Weeks handed, and the land shifted from the cool breezes of early autumn to the sour return of wintry weather. Daniel wrapped himself in an antique coat as he stepped out onto the porch one night time, his breath fogging within the crisp air. The sun had set in the back of the remote hills, painting the sky in deep purples and oranges. The wind howled across the open plains, rattling the barn doors inside the distance. Shadow stood within the paddock, his ears flicking towards the darkness past the ranch. He became careworn tonight. Daniel frowned. Something turned into off. The wind carried a valid, remote but wonderful. A whinny. Daniel's coronary heart skipped a beat. He turned sharply, eyes scanning the tree line. The sound came again, carried by means of way of the wind. And then, motion. A darkish shape emerged from the timber, its silhouette slightly visible in the moonlight. Daniel squinted, his pulse quickening. The shape grew clearer as it stepped into the open. His breath caught in his throat. It had become Storm. But he wasn't on my own. Behind him, more figures regarded. The complete band of Mustangs had again. Daniel stood frozen due to the fact the wild horses moved toward the ranch, their presence almost ghostly in the silver mild. Why had been they here? Why had they arrived lower back? Storm led the manner, his body more potent now, his legs now not shaky and unsure. He had grown. The stallion at the back of the herd snorted, watching Daniel carefully. The extraordinary Mustangs followed in shape, their bodies traumatic but calm. They weren't afraid. They had consist of purpose. Storm stopped some toes from Daniel, his darkish eyes assembly his all over again, the same eyes that had seemed returned at him the day he left. A silent fact succeeded between them, and Daniel located out, in that moment, Storm had decided on to return lower back decrease again. The foal had decided his circle of relatives, however something had pulled him back right here. Maybe it become unfinished industrial organization. Maybe it became something else absolutely. Daniel took a sluggish breakthrough, the cold air stinging his skin. "What are you doing right here, youngster?" he murmured. Storm nickered softly, lifting his head. The band didn't bypass. They had been waiting, watching. And Daniel had a sense something wonderful became about to